26th. We are being recorded, so those of you in the community who cannot join us today will be able to see the recording as well. It is Susan Wolf-Dickoff's final curriculum subcommittee meeting, and I'd like to thank her for her work on curriculum and on the school committee. And those of you who are able to join us, tomorrow will be her last school committee meeting as well. So I invite you all to join us as well tomorrow. So thank you, Susan, for all of your hard work. I'm sure others would like to thank you as well. So I'm sure we'll save the accolades for tomorrow, but I do want to thank you as it's your last curriculum subcommittee meeting. So thank you. We have an incredibly, as usual, full agenda with lots of items. So I guess we'll start with the approval of minutes from the March 15th subcommittee meeting. Is there anyone who would like to move them?
I'll move them.
Okay, and do we have a second? Susan will second them and we'll vote them. Helen?
Yes.
And Susan?
Yes, and in honor of my last meeting, I read them in advance, Robin, not during the
Me too. Me too.
Yeah.
A momentous occasion. Awesome. And I vote yes as well. And for those of you who are joining us, Stephen Ehrenberg is not able to join us, but we do have a quorum, so we will be holding our meeting. So the minutes are approved, Robin, so you can file those away in the approved column. The first item on our agenda is an update on the Student Opportunity Act amendment and just our Student Opportunity Act in general. And Leslie Ryan Miller is going to lead us or to share that information, or one of her staff will, or team.
Sure. It's going to be a team effort, Jen, and I'm going to share my screen. We put together just a couple of slides. Hold on 1 second.
We have a great team. It's always it's a team effort. It's a lovely team. So thank you to the entire team for coming and being here. And then also for those new members of the community who may be joining us, and I'm always everly optimistic that new members of the community will continue to join us. Perhaps we could introduce ourselves as well as we join in the meeting. So I guess I should have introduced myself. I'm Jennifer Monopoly. I'm currently chairing the subcommittee of the curriculum subcommittee of the school committee, joined by fellow members, Susan Wolf-Dickoff and Helen Charlepsky as well, are members of the curriculum subcommittee. Sorry. If you want to introduce yourselves, by all means, ladies. Humans.
You did a good job.
Okay.
Okay, can you guys see my screen?
Yeah.
Yes, we can.
Hey, all right. I'm working with 2 screens now, so I'm trying to get oriented here. So if anything's going haywire, just let me know. So thank you, and we will jump right in. As I said, we have a number, as you said, Jen, we have a number of topics. And so we just prepared some slides just to support our understanding, and we have a lot of information to digest. So wanted to give people just an opportunity to use the slides as a backdrop for information. And Michelle is going to walk us through the Student Opportunity Act.
Hi. So Student Opportunity Act was additional money that was added to Chapter 7D several years ago, right before the pandemic. And during the 1920 school year, we had to write a plan on how we use these funds. These funds were for Brookline, they were low. We received about 200 grand, maybe a little bit more. And it was added to our Chapter 70 funds. And we were told that we needed to use a certain percentage to support opportunity gaps for students, specifically students who are economically disadvantaged, students of color who were not performing well, or any subgroup that was in need of support. And so we wrote a plan that year, which really was about rolling out our new math program in K-5, and then the second year of the programs that were already out in the middle school. And the plan was to really use the program to learn the interventions in the program and to really look at the data and support students in increasing their math performance. So roll 2 years later, Student Opportunity Act changed its timeline to 21-22. And ironically, this is our first year of full implementation at K-5 with the investigations program. So what we did was met with the DESE group, and they went through our plan with us. Erin and I met with them, and they determined that our plan was still active and appropriate. And so we did not have to make any major amendments to the plan. So just so you know that this is a plan that I think Meg presented to you a little over 2 years ago, and that it is now being used. That money this year was used in the implementation of the math program. And so we will just be beginning to get our results after this year's MCAS and assessments to look at how our students are doing.
And guys, please tell me, like I said, I know it's hard to see people. So if we're gonna have a conversation, I can stop sharing if that makes sense and then come back to it. So just let me know if anyone has a preference.
Does anyone have, are there additional slides on the student opportunity?
So that's it.
Okay, do any committee members have any questions? Okay, I think it's pretty straightforward. I think it was just really important for people to understand and have an opportunity to ask questions if they had any about the money, the spending, and whether or not we needed to why we needed to file an amendment, and whether or not we needed to make any accommodations to our amendment. And I think this is pretty straightforward and clear, and no one has any questions. So I think we can go ahead and move on to the next item. If I understand correctly, the next item should be on the social studies materials review. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
great.
Correct, Jennifer. And we have Dr. Keith Lazama on the call also, the director of our METCO program. And so this is a collaboration between the Office of Teaching and Learning and the METCO office. And what this work will do, the just broad basis, and then I'll turn it over to Keith, is a review of our social studies materials starting in grades 6 through 12. And so I'll turn it over to Keith, and then a number of us might jump in. We might have Gary Schiffman joining, and Gabe is on the call. And so Keith, I'll turn it over to you.
Great. And thank you, Deputy Superintendent Leslie Ryan Miller, for the introduction, but also for your great leadership. As Leslie mentioned, and as you are aware, in partnership with the Office of Teaching and Learning, Greg Porter, who's also our curriculum coordinator for Social Studies K-8, Gary Schiffman, our chair for Social Studies Department at the high school, and Janae Utaro, our senior director of Educational Equity, we all came together and felt that it was necessary to conduct a review of our 6 through 12 social studies material, with a goal to better understand where inequities exist, to rectify and ultimately revolutionize teaching and learning in Brookline across our 6 through 12 social studies department. So we've worked as a team over the last 4 months to think critically about our goals and select the right outside agency to conduct this review. I'm happy that we've selected the National Teacher Center through our town bidding process. And through this process that took nearly 2 months, we came to a consensus that NTC would be the best consultants to do this work. So a little bit about NTC. So NTC was founded in 1998 and has worked across the United States and abroad, serving nearly 2 million students and more than 25,000 teachers in over 400 school districts. NTC's mission is to disrupt the educational inequities that exist in institutions. So for this review, NTC plans to conduct an 8-week review of our 6 through 12 social studies instructional materials. They will be conducting focus groups with our teachers and leaders, observing classrooms, and working closely with Gary and Greg to review materials. I'm also excited to share that a selected group of teachers, both middle and high school, will be working with our consultants as they review the social studies materials. It's important that they are part of this process and help with moving the social studies department forward. At the end of their review, it is our goal NTC will provide a detailed final report with findings and recommendations. This report will allow us to begin our work during the summer with our teachers to create a curriculum that is culturally responsive, where all students feel empowered. Additionally, NTC will conduct a review of our MECO staff and educators across PSB to examine the academic and social experiences of our students in MECO and other students of color. So we're super excited about this opportunity. And do you have any questions? The floor is open.
I think I'll stop sharing just so we can have a conversation here. And I see Gary's on the call, so I don't know. Gary, feel free. Hi, Gary. Feel free to jump in at any point. And just to give a little more context, so that was a perfect outline of the work, Keith. One thing to note is that this work is funded via METCO, our METCO grant. So we're very thankful for that partnership with METCO Inc. And quite frankly, just to put things in context, every so often, every month or so, I get an email or a communication from either a student or a teacher or a parent about something that they have seen in the curriculum that either feels biased, inequitable, or at its worst, racist. And this tends to happen with social studies as we're talking about just the history of our world, and sometimes that have been hard and unjust. And so, in time, the way that we talk about these issues has changed, and we want our materials to accurately reflect that. And so the best way to do this, we thought, was through a material review. And this is, I want to be really clear. This isn't about our teachers and something that they've put forward that is incorrect. This is work that I believe all districts need to do. I think everyone is really in this same place and space. And I'm really proud of Brookline for taking this on and making the move to get ahead of this and to right what's wrong in our materials. And so we felt like this was the best next move. And in all frankness, we're partnering. This is work we'd love to just take on ourselves, but we don't have the capacity to do this work and do it well. And we really need someone that's going to be objective, who's done this work before, who's accountable to timelines and doesn't let the day-to-day get in the way. And so hence our proposal to move forward with a partner to engage in this work. Any questions, comments, concerns?
I have a couple of questions.
Yes.
Are other METCO districts doing this also, or are we the only one?
I'm so happy you asked that, Helen. So we are the first to do this. And after we talked to the CEO of METCO Inc. about this, they are now encouraging other districts to do this same work. So we are leading this, and I'm really proud of that.
And how much is the contract with this company?
It is it 80,000, Keith?
It's 88,000. So it's 88,000, but we'll also be compensating teachers for their time as well. So there'll be stipends allocated to teachers who will be working with us on this work.
And that comes from our budget as opposed to the budget
that comes from, everything's coming from the MECO grant.
From the 88,000. Okay, great.
So we allocated close to 95,000 for social studies review.
Mm-hmm.
And some of this work will also continue during the summer as well. So you'll have the review, and then we'll have our team of teachers with Gary, Greg, Gabe, the whole LTL team come together and then start to think about how we, with those findings and recommendations, we start to push out the work that needs to be done.
And what is I'm sorry, when is the deliverables? When are they going to have the report, the final report? Is it?
So we're looking at mid-June to late June is when we should have the
Oh.
final report done.
So they've started already?
No, they're going to be starting soon. It's an 8-week process. So anywhere between 6 to 7 weeks is going to be focus groups, observations, looking at materials. And we believe the last week and a half, 2 weeks will be putting out the findings and recommendations. They do have a large team. So we believe that there's going to be probably close to anywhere between 10 to 12 consultants working with us throughout the time.
That's great.
And it could be, Helen, that we have to modify that timeline a little bit once they get here and, really see what we're working with. And I wouldn't be opposed to that if that means we need additional time for them to do it well.
Sure.
I think one key there, and part of why we talked about doing it this way, is that a big part of this is going to be handing materials off to them to review, so they can crank out 8 hours a day of just reading materials and reviewing materials in a way that we can't. Then the teacher time and the focus group time, right, that's more structured, but a lot of this they're going to be able to do on their own time, and that's why we're able to get that kind of speed.
So in the high school, and actually from 6th through 12th, do we use mostly textbooks or primary sources or teacher-driven stuff? What are we using now?
I can speak for middle school, and then Gary, you want to hit high school? And Greg couldn't join us today, but I feel reasonably confident. We have textbooks in 6 through 8. There's like a core textbook that kind of anchors the course.
Right.
And then there's certainly a wide variety of primary sources, some teacher created materials. There's a number of common lessons. And so in some ways it's like a woven tapestry where we have a variety of things. And so part of what we've done in the last couple of years is reorient 6th and 7th grade in particular to the new framework, so that we get all of world history in 2 years. We hit every region of the world. And then 8th grade is, I mean, as you all have heard, right, kind of transitioning into a civics curriculum. And so we want to make sure that the sources we're selecting are thoughtful. So it is a blend of all of those things.
Helen, I would say the same for the high school. It's all of the above. The older the students, the more likely they are to have textbooks with us. If AP courses all have textbooks, AP Gov has a textbook, AP Human Geography has a textbook, AP US History has a textbook. Other 11th grade classes, US History, have access to a textbook. Most of them don't use it. No one in 9th or 10th grade is using a textbook anymore. I think Legal Studies has a textbook. It's a non-AP senior class. Vast majority of materials students encounter are teacher generated, primary sources, secondary sources, tertiary sources, databases, things like that. So it's not an easy job for a consultant, but we will, I mean, the design of this model. So I just want to say generally, I think this is a terrific project. I have a congenital skepticism about outside consultants. But in this case, I actually think it's a really good idea. I think it's much harder for us to be honest with ourselves, just because it's harder for us to see what we've always been doing. And in this case, have people, and we looked at, there were competitors for this grant, and the materials this group sent in were really impressive. One of the documents they sent in was a report they wrote for another district, which was very fair, frank, evidence-based. It's like, okay, these sound like professionals. And the other thing I love about the model is that we're recruiting teachers to work with them. And, you know, as good as a consultant may be, if they leave and we do nothing, then nothing's happened. So having teachers bought into the process, working with those folks, gathering the materials. I mean, I'm going to have people at the high school responsible for putting all this stuff in front of the consultants. Then we follow up with summer work. That's the way this can make a real difference for us. So I wish we had more time. Maybe we'll make more time for it. But the reality is, I think it's time for us to do this. And I think we've got good consultants for it. And I think we've got the right model for it.
So let me just raise one thing that sort of, I mean, I think this is a good idea, and I think we should be doing it. But one red flag that comes up in my head is, okay, they determined that all the books we're using are racist and awful and anti-Semitic and whatever, anti-Hispanic, anti-Asian. Do we end up buying all new textbooks?
Well, so that's a great
And where
question.
is the budget for that?
Yep. So that's a great question. And one of the things that is a requested deliverable, and I'm just reading it.
And I don't think that's what we have.
Sure. I don't think
I
it
don't
is.
think so, but
I don't think it is. I don't think it is either. But there is a working group that is going to be made up of educators and central office administration, where we'll review the findings together to determine the best next steps. What is doable, what's manageable, and what can we roll out in a way that best serves students. So, you know, to your point, Helen, I don't think they're going to find that. I mean, I think they're going to find some things, and we're going to need to prioritize and make some decisions about what our next steps are. And so I don't have a great answer to that, but I do feel good about it being a collaborative approach. So I just have a lot of, I have a lot of, I feel good about our ability to manage what we get in a way that the findings that we have in a way that makes sense.
I think I was responding to Keith saying we're going to revolutionize the curriculum.
Well,
You know, and that sort of said to me,
Well,
oh.
I think if that was the case, if it was the case that we found all that stuff to be racist, anti-Semitic, then I think it is our duty and responsibility to make the changes needed.
Yeah, I agree.
And
But
I'm willing to do that, even if it means that we have to revamp our, I shouldn't say that, I'm not in the level to say it, but if we have to revamp our budget to make sure our kids are getting the best materials in front of them, then I think we need to do that. But I think that's, you know, we're talking about hundreds of years of institutional structural isms, right? So we also have to be mindful that it's not going to be the summer of 22 where we change it. So I think, as Leslie mentioned, when we start to roll out these steps, we're rolling out these steps and plans and years of like, all right, how do we change some of these, you know, structural and institutional isms that continue to harm our kids when they come to school? And I think it may take 3 years, it may take 10 years, but I think at least we now have a start where we can now kind of guide
a path forward.
Yeah.
Right?
I think we've got a good example from the 7th grade social studies curriculum where we purchased a new textbook and we knew when we purchased it that it did not have a good chapter or chapters on the history of
History of.
Oh no, I wonder if Gabe knows he's frozen.
No, I don't think so. He's probably talking.
I'll go knock on his door.
He's totally frozen.
I actually want to hear that example
Yeah.
because I don't know about it.
Well, let me ask a question while we're waiting for Gabe to unfreeze, so we're not all staring at him, and then he's going to come back into live action and it's going to be awkward. So what are we thinking? So just two questions. One is, where are we exactly in the timeline if we're talking an 8-week process and we think we're going to be done in mid-June? I'm just doing like counting on my fingers here and saying, wait a minute, I'm having trouble with 8 weeks in mid-June if we're in May. So can someone just walk me through like where we are right now and when we think we'll get the report? And then the other question I have is, and this is, you know, longer term, but like, what about a review of K-5? Maybe I'm just, you know, dreaming here, but what do we think about that?
Well, one of the things, we have the contract ready to go to be signed and sealed. We did want to wait, or actually I held up the contract because I wanted to have this meeting first to see if there was any feedback from the subcommittee around next steps, anything we needed to integrate if we had missed something. So we'll get that contract in. I expect that will go through fairly quickly. Contracts have been going through quickly, and they will start the work fairly shortly. Now, if we can't make the full 8 weeks, I envision that the consultants could go a little bit into the summertime, or maybe we need to regroup and come back to kind of finalize things when we come back in the fall. So the 8-week timeline is what the new teacher center suggested. And I do think we can hold to the 8 weeks, but we may have some fits of starts and stop where it's 8 weeks cumulatively, but we spread it out and we take some pauses. So I think that what I definitely want to make sure happens is that we get new teacher center in before the end of the year, just to get familiar with our teachers, to get familiar with the high school, our middle school, and then, you know, they can start the work. But, you know, I don't want to ignore that there's going to be a period of just getting familiar with one another that we're going to need to have. So that's where we are.
Yeah, I think it'll be important to get them in sooner, just so that they can get access to the teachers to gather that material, so that they, especially anything that's sort of floating around that's not textbook based or district created, you know, things that might be floating out there that might be more teacher specific. I think that would be really important to get. I don't know how common that is at the high school level, but that might be more common in the middle school. what are the thoughts around a K-5 review longer term?
Yep. So, we did have that in the initial proposal, and then we broke it up into K-5 and then 6-12 because it just seemed too big. And the nature of the materials are just very different in K-5. They're more centrally based and coming from central office, with input from teachers that, the materials were created with teachers. So I think we'll get through this and see how this goes and take some lessons learned and then think about how we can do this same work with K-5.
Susan, did you have, yep, go ahead.
Yeah, no, so this is fantastic. So I know we've been talking about this for a while and there have been attempts in the past, but this does sound sort of comprehensive and thoughtful. So thank you for that. Just a couple questions. One is there was a line that said inclusive of all identities, but focusing on racism. I think we might need a couple more sentences to just help define what that means and what it looks like to set expectations, just because I think that when people see that, they're going to want to know things like, so are we just creating a unit on LGBTQ history and then we're going to like move on? We're not incorporating it for the rest of the year and then we're going to check our box? Or is this like, are we including ableism, anti-Semitism? There are a lot of different pieces to inequities and inequalities in the curriculum. And so I think it would just be helpful if we're going to communicate this out to school committee or the public to just be more specific about what it means or what it looks like to be inclusive of all, but be focused on one. Because I can imagine what it means, but there are a lot of different ways to take that. That would just be one response. Another one is, I think there's a question about when we talk about the 6 through 12 in particular, students are going to have a lot of opinions, as Gary well knows, about what kinds of history is being taught and whether it's inclusive or not. And so at any rate, it just seems to me that I know 8 weeks is quick, but it does seem that having student voice in this process might be important, especially at the high school, so that as soon as we define which identities you mean, I think I would just sort of ask if that's possible and or maybe if it's not possible, what it would look like to at least engage with them. And then
that will definitely be the case, Susan. We definitely want student feedback. They're one of the constituents that we named in terms of administrators and even administrators, families, educators, and students. Sorry.
Yeah. No, go ahead. Sorry, finish that.
No, that was it.
Yeah. Maybe I just didn't see it on the slide as to like that there would be calling out student voice specifically. It did talk about teacher voice that I got. It said educator, staff, family, community. I don't remember. I didn't see. I think for just the high school in particular, now that I have 2 high schoolers and Gary knows this better than I do, but just they have a lot of opinions on things and whether their perspective of inequality is the same as the adult's perspective on inequality. So at any rate, so I'm gonna put that there. And my last question is just a financial one. Is this being paid for by a specific METCO grant or by the general METCO grant?
This is through the general METCO grant, through the funds that we receive through METCO for the public schools of Brookline.
Got it. Okay. So just one sort of messaging note, especially as we go into override season, the METCO, bringing METCO students in, which I've fought hard for more than a decade, and keeping them in our system costs roughly $5 to $6 million a year. The METCO grant is a tiny portion of it. So I think one thing that sort of happens is when we talk about the METCO grant as being only METCO, money is fungible across all the different places that money can go. So I would just sort of be thoughtful, as for school committee as much as anyone else, I would just be thoughtful about how we message sort of METCO grant money because there's so much else that goes into funding METCO students. And sometimes that can trigger people and make them start complaining about things we don't need them to be complaining about. So anyway, just a lesson from the past. But anyway, overall, I'm really excited.
Clarifying things before you get,
no, go ahead.
Because I heard you say something a couple of times about students and sort of their opinions of the equities. And I want to make sure that we're talking about, this isn't about like a unit on equity or a unit on an ism, but that we're talking about the depth in looking at our materials.
Mhm.
And so, right, so giving students a framework to look at that, not the content of what it is, that's sort of predetermined.
Well, no, so I will defer to Gary on this because I have an N of 2, but I do know that when sometimes we have thought something was included in the curriculum, it was included in a way that was like, okay, but here's our day on X, and now we're not going to talk about it for the rest of the year. And students have opinions on that. So
I understand that. I understand, but
Yeah.
I think just keeping in mind that like the content or the point of our units sort of is one thing, and then the materials we use to teach those units is a second piece. And I just want to make sure we're clear on what this
Mhm.
actually is doing.
Did anyone else have any more questions? Oh,
Wait a minute, just to be clear, because I heard two different things, and maybe Susan understood it, but I didn't. The Metco, the total Metco grant that we get from the state is what's funding this, or this is a separate grant out of Metco?
This is the Metco grant that we get from the state.
From the state, okay. That's what, so we're using part of our okay. That's what I wanted to understand. Okay.
Are there other questions that folks have about this body of work?
I would hope that at some point when it's finalized, we would get, the curriculum subcommittee would look at it, even if it's during the summer.
Absolutely.
I think that would be great.
Yep,
And before we make decisions about where we're going, sort of to have some input at least.
Sure, we'll keep this group informed all the way.
Okay.
All right, anything else here? Keith, do you want to weigh in? Gary, Gabe, anything else? Okay.
We're on time.
Right. All right, so next, and you know what, actually, as I'm looking, so I was looking at our agenda, we did add some information about the dyslexia screener here because we thought that that was important to provide an update on. So I'm sorry that we didn't note that in the agenda, but let me share my screen again. All right, and I have to shout out Michelle. Michelle has done an incredible amount of work moving this screener forward. This is something that the district's been talking about for some time. And so I'm really proud that we have been able to move this work. And Michelle has really taken the lead on it. So I'm going to pass it over to Michelle to talk about where we are.
Sure. So we just included here just the 3 highlights that the state had talked about what the purpose for our dyslexia screener. So, giving us a set of screening guidelines so that we can identify a tool, making sure that we use that to provide a framework for intervention for students who are at risk. And again, we go down this idea of at risk because a student will demonstrate any particular profile of a reader, and some things will highlight that they're further at risk of being actually dyslexic, or that they're at risk of falling behind in reading, and we have to address it. So giving us a framework for that. And then comprehensive resource for evidence-based practices aimed for educators to support the students at risks. So we've been using this as our kind of guiding light as we're looking at the dyslexia screeners. And as I told you the last time, we had come down to 3 tools. We looked at Early Bird, we looked at iStation, and we were looking at the M-Class Dibbles tool. We had a team of educators, I think at one point we were at 34 strong, come to all three presentations, and they also were given materials to play and use. And then we were given a tool to rate the materials and provide feedback. I should have brought the feedback, but I can share that with you at another point because we got excellent feedback from teachers. 100% of the educators that were involved in the process determined that the M-Class and which is a comprehensive system that includes efficient Dibbles 8th edition, was the right tool for us to be using right now. They did like parts of the other two tools, but this one was, when we asked if it was a good match for Brookline, we had 100% consensus. So we have identified the M-Class unit, the M-Class tool to be used with our students in the fall. Leslie, if you go to the next slide, I just want to update you though, our timeline. As you know, I think I was a little aggressive in thinking of what we could get done. So on the left side was our original timeline, and it talked about us coming to update you and that we would have, you know, this all pilot taken care of. We're a little behind. So just to kind of just tell you, we have identified, we had the most exciting group of teachers, because we had teachers in grades K-4, even though it's a K-2, who came with interest. We did some literature review, we did some product review. They came January through March. At the end of March, we were really able to have all of our data back, and we looked at it with our team from the district level and determined that the data pointed us directly towards the M-Class. So that took place in April. So what's going to happen from May through June is we are working with M-Class right now to solidify a contract for next year. But in the meantime, to also get some licenses into the district, we've had some teachers come forward and say, I'd really like to do this with my class this year and try it out and see the data I get. Because the data dashboard really does provide an extensive amount of information for teachers to use around grouping and specific skills. And then we are also engaging a team of teachers, K2 classroom teachers. Pretty much we're going to invite the same teachers, not the people, but the same groups of teachers. Sorry, role groups. Couldn't come up with the word, the same role groups of teachers to come and join us for the rollout plan. And we'll be meeting with them from now through the end of June to come up with a plan. What's the PD teachers need? When are they going to receive it? What's the expectation, so that we can be ready to roll out in the fall? That's where we're at.
So I'm impressed you got 100% of Brookline teachers to agree about anything.
Percent of the 35 of the 34 strong.
That's a lot. That's a lot. That's impressive. It must be good. And I think it is. I think Newton uses the same one, actually, if I'm not mistaken. I think Newton uses.
I think Newton actually went with Early Bird.
I had heard they used Dibbles. Okay.
Yeah, and just so you know, one of the things that teachers really liked about it, which I thought they weren't going to like about it, so I was completely wrong, was what they really liked was that they're the ones that administer the assessment, and it's quick. It's not, and that the data is automatic. So those were the three selling.
So how long does it take to administer?
So really, the way the one we're purchasing, 6 to 7 minutes.
And you can really get good data out of
the kind of data that we're looking for. So it's a lot of phonemic awareness. It's being able to name objects quickly. It's really about those, because really the purpose is these foundational skills that students need to become readers. And so it's not a heavy comprehension assessment, which is like some of the other assessments we use that take longer to have a student read through, and it cuts you off at the frustration level, so the student doesn't have to go any further.
Okay. All right.
And you could.
And your timeline isn't that much off. I mean,
No, but I really
did it
thought
by
we'd have
April.
classrooms already, and I'd be here showing you dashboards.
So we're thinking rollout in the fall, and then this would go, which grade levels would be administering?
K2.
K2, K through 2.
Yeah.
And then has the district made any determination about what other assessments aside from the dyslexia screener would be administered next year, or was that still in the works aside from?
You mean say more?
Like, are we still going to do BAS? Are we still?
We haven't had that conversation yet.
My mind went from one assessment to the next. So.
And what happens to those kids 3 through 6 who may not have been diagnosed?
So do you want me to keep going, Leslie? So,
Sure.
yeah. Okay. So the nice thing, one of the reasons that M-Class was the chosen assessment is that it doesn't end at second grade. This is where we're starting, because this is where the state really says we're missing students. There are students going through the cracks. And I think we see it here in the district with the number of students that wind up going through CST, or the number of students that are sent to evaluation. And so what we're trying to, and the timing at which it happens. I know Steve has talked about that a lot on these calls. So it doesn't prevent us from using it with other students. So if we get a student that's new, or we have a student who we just need more information on, it's that we are starting by doing all students K-2.
Okay. Yeah, no, that's good. And other teachers will know this is available to them if they need it.
I don't know if it will be the immediate first thing at the beginning of the year, but that's, the plan is to be able to support students, because we do need to, we need to screen students who come into the district unknown. And we need to be able to screen students that, like, whatever other assessment we're using is not identifying, but that we know the student has a challenge.
I'm sorry, can I ask another question, guys? Are we going to survey parents to ask them to self-identify whether they?
Excellent question. So this question has come up multiple times. And I think where we're at is I know that Megan Gainey in the Office of Registration, we've started to have that conversation of like, where in our process are we identifying? Because yes, it is hereditary. And so we want to be out, we need that information, or is it going to come with the kindergarten parent survey? We haven't,
I would make a suggestion. Do it just before you do the testing, inform them about the testing. And at that time, say that, we would appreciate if anyone in your family, you don't have to say you, anyone in your family has dyslexia. It's an important indicator for us. And we would need to know that for your child's benefit.
That absolutely could be an option. I mean,
I don't have an answer for that.
Quiet. Sorry. Siri loves to talk too.
Leslie, you have anything to add to that one?
No, nope. That's exactly my thoughts. And I think, Helen, too, what you might be thinking of is there are a number of districts that use DIBELS. So DIBELS is part of the M-Class suite of assessments. I know when I worked in Boston Public Schools, we used M-Class with all students, and it gave a really tight data dashboard. So I think in time, we're starting with the Dyslexia Screener, and we'll see what else M-Class can offer. And I'm really interested in hearing from educators around the benefits they see, what else they'd like to use. So I think they're really going to guide what our next step is. And we're not at the point where we're ready to say we're not using BAS. I think that that gives us very valuable information. We may want to think about a different way in which we use it. We're using it somewhat less as a formative assessment and sometimes more like a summative assessment. And so it'll be really interesting to see what the initial group of educators K-2 think and what they're asking for, and then seeing what M-Class maybe can provide. But it is used in a number of districts. I have a very good friend who is the ELA coordinator in Wellesley, and they use DIBELS there. So it's used quite widely.
One other question. How much does this M-Class screener cost?
Yeah, so just it needs to be broken apart because we have some initial upfront costs for the kits per teacher. We need to purchase the kits because, like Leslie said, it's still a DIBEL. And then there's the yearly
Subscription fee?
Yes, sorry. End of the day, it's not good for me. The yearly subscription. So what it looks like, if it's just broken down over the first 3 years, it looks like it's about $30,000 a year. However, that's not actually accurate because they're still breaking down for us what are those initial upfront costs. So I could give you a better estimate probably in a couple of days.
No problem. Okay, I just wanted an order of magnitude.
Yeah, and some of it's about, because in those initial costs is also the training, which is several $1,000s. So that's the part I can't.
Now, I was thinking in the hundreds of thousands, so.
Oh, no, no,
30,000
no,
is
no, no.
Definitely
no.
doable.
What they sent us was a $99,000 bill, but it's for the first 3 years, but then it wasn't broken apart. So I can't. I will, but I can't.
Okay, so I'm just looking at the agenda. So we dove into the OTL goals a little bit because the dyslexia screener was part of the OTL goals. And I think we're gonna sort of dip out of that and back onto another item on the agenda. And then are we gonna move into the multi-tiered systems and our response to intervention
Yeah.
work? Is that where we're heading to now?
Yes.
So I'm just trying to keep the train heading on the tracks in the right direction. So we
Sure.
can actually maybe hit our 6 o'clock goal. So if anyone has any other questions about the dyslexia screener, I think we have some questions just about how that bill is broken down. If we can kind of come back to that, and then just trying to keep some notes here. We'll swing back to the social studies material review timeline when you get there. We'll come back to that in the future. We'll come back to the dyslexia screener breakdown, and you'll let us know how that goes over time. And then I think we're ready to move on to the next agenda item. Does that sound good, Leslie?
Yep, that sounds good. Can you guys see my screen?
Yep.
All right, so this is work that I want to share to be timely, but I also feel I'm remiss in presenting this without Casey Miller, as this has really been a collaborative effort. And this has been something we've been talking about in response to the disproportionality citing that was founded in Brookline by the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. And so one of the things that we hear really frequently from teachers is around not having either the right data to make an assessment about a student and what their needs are, and also not having tools that are directly linked to what a child needs. So very often I will hear, specifically in terms of our intervention practices, that a child is presenting with this, I'm not feeling that the intervention is matching what the need of the child is. All that being said, I'm also well aware that we have far too much curriculum for our school day. And so I am always hesitant when someone's asking to add something. How does that impact what we're already doing? And the feeling that teachers are already having around, I have too much and not enough time. And so one of the things that OTL and OSS would like to collaboratively roll out is work around response to intervention. And so this is not doing something new. This is just how we organize what we have. And so I think so many people are already familiar with RTI. I have the definition here. But this is another place because of the disproportionality citing, we're required to spend a particular amount of our IDEA funds in service of remedying the disproportionality. And this is one of the ways and one of the places that we would like to spend those funds, as we think it will really support teachers in their day-to-day practice and give them what they're asking for in terms of, making sure that we have the specific supports that our teachers need in support of student growth. And I was going to say one other thing. And also, I think this really complements nicely with the dyslexia screener, as we talk about how that tool will give us more information on students. The big question is, once we have that information, what are we going to do? And that's where the rubber really hits the road, and RTI can really support this work. And so again, we're looking to partner with an agency to really deliver coherent professional development and support to our teachers and for our students. And so this is just some of the scope of work that we are really interested in. as well as the benefits of what this work will allow for. So for instance, I feel really fortunate in Brookline, coming from Boston Public Schools, to come here and to have the number of interventionists that we have, where their sole responsibility in literacy is to support intervention practices. And then in math, where our math specialists not only deliver intervention, they also do some coaching of teachers. But to have that additional FTE support is a real gift. And so how do we organize what we have so that we are not burning out our interventionists, burning out our teachers? How do we work more efficiently with the supports and practices that we have, as well as figure out, are there other supports that we may need, other interventions that we may need in support of students? So this is work, again, I just wanted to preview with the group, and I think that we'll come back to when we have Casey here, because she's a really important part of the conversation, and the Office of Student Services is an important part of the conversation. Oh, and one thing I forgot, I really want to give as much support as possible to our CST teams. Our CST teams do an incredible amount of work. And we meet with them almost monthly. We skipped April just because of the break. But they're working incredibly hard to support teachers and students. And so how do we put a frame on things so that that work isn't such a heavy lift? So thinking again about the interventions, the data that CST teams can have access to when thinking about next steps with students. So again, to me, this is not something new. This is a way to be more efficient and effective with what we have. And so I'm open to any comments, questions, concerns people might have. Let me stop sharing. And again, we can always return to this when we have Casey's at a conference. And so she wasn't able to attend today.
So Leslie, can I ask a question? Is there also by any chance a slide on multi-tiered systems of support, or no, to differentiate the difference?
Just response to intervention.
Okay, so
and the primary difference I can tell you is around MTSS is also brings into play behavior, looking at behavior in a particular way. There's something else I was about to say and totally lost my train of thought.
Well, I think for me, I think I was going to say the piece I think that for me is really helpful too is that it also includes tier 1 as well in it, which, like, response to intervention, I always think of as sort of like the tier 2 and the tier 3, because it's I don't know. I'm always trying to differentiate, like MTSS includes RTI in it for me. I'm always trying to think sort of like how to put these two pieces together. So I don't know if that's helpful for other people to sort of think about how it is, but it really is like for me, like a structure, like you said, it's not a new idea, right? But it's really like a formalizing structure for how CSTs can sort of utilize a structure to sort of like figure out how we can help these kids and what's a process for this. So it's just a more formalized structure. So, I mean, I think this is great. I think it's a really helpful format. What are there things that you need feedback from us on, or is this just sort of like a precursor conversation? Is there feedback you need from us, or just sort of like getting a conversation started?
Sure. So I think it's really getting the conversation started and previewing. And, we're certainly thinking about our tier 1 of RTI, because that's really, to be honest, the highest leverage, in my opinion, piece to RTI. And I think that this will help us think of our data in a particular way. So one thing that's been helpful to me that Michelle and I talk a lot about is when we think about the number of students that need intervention, RTI gives you a frame where you would really expect to see a certain number of children receiving, a certain percentage of children receiving tier 2, a certain percentage of children receiving tier 3. And if it's above that percentage, you really need to check your systems for equity, for effective teaching practices. So if we are, when we look at the data and we see in particular places, there are 15, 20% of students receiving tier 3, that's a red flag. We should not have that many students in tier 3. Now, if we have the data to back it up, and occasionally maybe you have a situation like that, but we're really looking at 5% of students in tier 3. And so I think this will be a way for schools really to make some decisions about their data. And it gives them a framework to start asking questions about their practices and what students need. And it's certainly, that's what it's done for me as a district leader, is it makes me think about, okay, where do things look like they're a little bit out of whack, and where are we, this is, typical and kind of the norm. So from my perspective, that's some of the greatest benefit of RTI.
Is this something that we think is like sort of future work, maybe things that we'll be able to delve into a little bit more this year or next year, or I'm just sort of.
Yeah, well, what I hope is that, because of it's IDA funding that's funding this, there's some, items around bids and things that we don't need to partake in. But I do hope that we will get a partner that can also give us an assessment of where we are. So where are we starting, so that we have a baseline, some baseline data around, okay, this is where you are, this is where we need to get to, and we can move incrementally towards where we would like to be. And again, I'm very aware of, especially with budget issues and folks saying, how are you spending this money on this? Well, one, with the IDEA funding, we were told we had to spend it in a particular way. Secondly, a lot of the funds that we're using, they're one-time funds. So it's not as if we could have hired an FTE with the funds. They were going to be gone in a year. And so I'm really thinking about how we use the funds to build capacity and support educators with what they've been sharing with us is a need. And again, the reason to partner is because, just full transparency, first of all, I don't know this work as well as someone who does this every day for their profession. Not that that's not my profession. I know quite a bit about RTI, but someone who coaches around this, et cetera. And I know if we're going to do this work, we can't have starts and stops, and we need someone who's fully committed to it. At least here in the Office of OTL, we can't be only committed to this. We have day-to-day things that come up. We're dealing with a multitude of federal grants. There are just things that are going to take us away from supporting teachers and giving teachers what they need. And so I don't want that to be the issue.
That's great. No, this all sounds really reasonable and really good to me. I don't know if other committee members have questions. What's the next step for you all at OTL with this work right now?
Sure. So we've talked to a couple of consultants around the work. And so I think the next step is really finalizing someone who we think is going to be a good fit for the public schools of Brookline. And then talking, quite frankly, with principals about how this work fits into their school improvement plans, how we work with them to find the time to engage educators. So what we know is that everybody's like burned out. And so how do we use the times that we have to move on this work? Can we use some faculty meetings? Can we use some of the opening days of school? Can we use part of the PD day, so that we're not asking educators to do this above what they're already doing, but integrating it into the time that we already have? So quite frankly, I think for me, the two biggest things are selecting a vendor who's going to meet our needs. And then secondly, is to think about how we fit this into our day-to-day work, so it doesn't become an additional thing, but it actually addresses what we're already hearing are needs that schools have.
Anyone have any questions, concerns, thoughts? Susan?
No, I would just say.
Uh-oh.
I
We
know.
can't hear you, Susan. Sorry.
And I took off my earbud. I think this really makes sense. And I think, just Leslie, to your point, I hope it wasn't too opaque when I was talking about Metco, but I think to your point about it being one-time money, I think is an important piece just to communicate when we're talking about the funding on the merits. It makes all the sense in the world. I just think it's important to make sure that we are kind of showing people that we're matching those sources, because we kind of keep getting pushback on that. So anyway, which is I think different from the Metco conversation, if that makes sense, which I also support. I just think it's a different message for financing.
Yep, I definitely get in, when budget times are tight, people, they want to know where the funds are going. And so this to someone is going to look like a tremendous amount of money that's going out. But I just want to be crystal clear. This is not money that we could have spent on FTE or personnel. And so I want to use the funding to support the personnel that we do have.
Perfect.
No, and that makes sense. And there will be cost savings if it's done well, there should be cost savings in the end.
Yeah, that's my hope.
And better education for students, more importantly.
Sure.
And even the cost savings, I guess that's the one thing I worry about. I mean, I hear the process and that's great, but how do we, when do the students get to move in this? We've been found for violation or whatever you want to call it. At what point do we expect that students will start to benefit from this?
Sure. Hopefully right away. Hopefully as soon as we start to implement. And, quite frankly, there was work that Jennifer Fisher Mueller started with the CSTs that was it was excellent work, really detailed. And in that work, she really outlined the RTI process. And then when I started as senior director, that was when she left. And I remember having conversations with CST leaders and educators about RTI, but then we had nothing to support them. So we're like talking about the triangles, but we have no PD. We're not supporting anyone with it. So I want to bring it back to that. And so again, I don't think this is new work for Brookline. I think Jennifer started this specifically with CSTs, and now we're going to be able to really make good on, let's support people with what we know needs to happen. And again, Casey and I thought of RTI just because of what we hear from educators around what am I supposed to use for data? This student is going through intervention. They've been through intervention for 4 years. What's next? It's like, all right, let's have some data systems that we can use, that help us discuss next steps, that tell us if we have the right or maybe we don't have the right interventions. So again, it's I think it will be a good framework for organizing us.
Great.
And last I'll just say, when I think of what concerns me, again, I'm just trying to be really mindful about how are we doing all this work? And that's what Dr. Guillory has asked too. And so we're really talking with coordinators and principals about, okay, what are the things we have to roll out? Who's focusing on what? When I specifically think of our pre-K to 5 educators who are dealing with a lot of different subject areas and their curriculum and standard changes with the standards coming down the pike, and they can't do all of this at once. We really need a long-term plan about how everyone is going to get the same material, but they're going to get it at different timings. And I think we need to base it on what are the school goals? What are particular classroom goals? And so that planning is, that's big. And we still need to deliver on that, quite frankly. So we're working on that.
Well, that's a great segue into the Office of Teaching and Learning Goals, I think.
Yes, and let me see.
Are there any other questions on this particular agenda item? Okay, seeing none. I think we're ready to move on. I think the Office of Teaching and Learning Goals, there we go.
Okay. And so, this is, and Gabe and Michelle are going to probably jump in here, but this is something we're recently implementing called the schedule review process. And this is really getting at our time on learning. And so I'll just give you a second to take just a moment to read through this because I don't want to read it to you. But I will talk about, so what I'm excited about is that this is a real cross-functional team across all of our departments. Now, typically, well, okay, let me move back a little bit. I think that this process addresses multiple things. I think it addresses budget. I think it addresses FTE. I think it addresses schedules and time on learning. And so I did want to share this process because we've gone through it with 2 schools already. We've gone through it with FRR and Lawrence, and tomorrow we will have Heath, and then Thursday we will have Baker. But I'm putting this out there in terms of our time on learning because that is a core piece of this work. And so this is a real cross-functional collaboration with all of our senior departments and schools. So we'll have administration and finances at the table, OSS, Office of Equity, did we not put human resources on here? Oh, we sure didn't. We got to add human resources. Ty Fluker is engaged in this process also. And typically this would happen, not now, this would happen before budget. Because this could also help us with our budget processes. But in terms of time on learning, we're taking some time to talk about scheduling. What are the FTE that schools need in order to deliver the most effective and efficient schedule? What are the challenges in their scheduling? And so in doing that, we're also reviewing their instructional minutes. And so maybe about a month ago now, we asked principals to enter data that shared the time on learning in every subject area in every grade. And so what we saw was that those times across schools and across grades, they're discrepant. And there's no other way to put that. They are discrepant, they're not necessarily equitable, and they are different in different schools for a number of reasons, with the majority of those being really valid reasons, whether it is space constraints or particular populations that the school is trying to better serve and schedule around. And so that's one of the things that we do in the schedule review process is just share where a school falls in terms of minutes with their other K-8 counterparts. And so I think that is pretty eye-opening, but then also talking about what are the things that we need to do to make the minutes more equitable. I know in the past, there's been a lot of talk around time allocations. And yes, there was a time when I know the Office of Teaching and Learning did put out time allocations. I personally don't feel comfortable doing that now. There are no time allocations via DESE. So I just want to, somebody saying, well, what does DESE say? DESE doesn't have time allocations. They have a time allocation just for the school year. Number of hours that we should be instructing students. But in terms of a breakdown of ELA, math, social studies, we don't have that. And so we will get to that at some point, but I think there's still some unearthing and just real-time support that we have to give to schools before we can make any types of major shifts. And so, the big finding here, which I don't think we've just kind of put out there, is that yes, our times on learning are discrepant across schools, and we're really working to make that more equitable. I feel like I'm just going on and on. Gabe, Michelle.
Yeah, can I jump in? I'll jump in. I think one of the pieces that Leslie sort of alluded to is as we're doing these, like all of central office with the building leaders meetings,
Sharing.
we're getting depth and understanding of like why they've had to make the adjustments they've had, right? So we have all the data, but we want to make sure that we're really thoughtful about how we work with the schools to make any of those adjustments. And so as we do this, when we sat down with Lawrence, Monica was able to explain why she's made certain choices that might be a little bit different than another school because they have different resources and different facilities. And so that's why these meetings are so helpful right now, and that will allow us to then get a really deep and thoughtful picture instead of just making assumptions based on numbers.
Mm-hmm. Yes, Helen.
So I'll tell you one of my pet peeves. And that has to do with, we have a schedule, we have a contract that allows teachers to work until, they have to work 6 hours, but it can be hours after school or hours before school, from 7 till 4, if I remember correctly. It's unless the contracts changed. A number of years ago, we did that so that we could have some flexibility if we needed it. And the thing for me is the special education pullouts during the day, where kids who need to be in the classroom, with their teachers during the day, but need that extra help really afterward, to be extra help afterwards. And to check the contract, I'm pretty sure it's there. And if there were ways to work that into the schedule, that teachers would know their schedule is, from 9 till 4 or whatever.
So I only see that for a group at the high school, which were the lab specialists, the people that worked in the labs.
That's
and
all that is
librarians.
there? There's nothing else in terms of,
No, occupational therapists.
what is
physical
the school
therapists.
day? What do they talk about?
They
as the
said
school?
the school day is, full school day for elementary teachers is between 7:30 and 3. The high, right.
Okay, 7:30 and 3. So,
7:30, the 6.5 hours, but the issue is they have to, in order to meet the other contractual needs, they really have to be there when the school day is open. I think that doesn't provide for the flexibility I think that it was intended to.
I think the other piece that's really important there is that when we're asking students with disabilities or 504s to stay at a longer school day,
That's hard.
we may restrict them from transportation opportunities or after school opportunities. And we have to be very, very careful about how we do that.
yes, I agree, but also we're also restricting them from participating in some of their classroom or their fun activities that they enjoy in school.
Well, I
know?
think, yeah, I think we have to be careful about, right, I think we have to be careful because we need some of those people in the buildings also to cover the students that are physically there. So even if they flex, we'd need more staffing. But I think that what we have noticed as well is in terms of getting to our instructional hours as a district, we're also right on the edge. Like
I know.
we have to teach every minute that
We
students
have the shortest school
building.
day of any district
Yeah,
around.
so just sort of thinking that through as well.
I get that, but what I'm trying to say is, I'm talking about special education teachers, not so much regular education teachers. Because, well, go ahead.
I think what we're seeing as we work with each school is that things are complex within the building, right? In a way that we, as this kind of newly formed team, need to really learn and understand. I don't think we can get into the contractual pieces right now, but.
Well, all I'm saying is, think outside the box if it's possible. That's all.
Yeah, and I know we're going to probably talk about this later, but part of the schedule review and part of the middle school in particular review that we're going to look at is like, how do we schedule times for intervention? Because we offer a lot, and I know we've talked about this before. We give students a lot of different things, and each of those takes time in a limited day. And there are ways to schedule that allow for students to get a double dose without taking away from other things.
Mhm.
And so part of what we need to make sure we do is have really good information, because scheduling a K-8 school the way we do is extremely complex, much more complex than a K-5 elementary school or a 6-8 middle school. And so that's where we're at. We're not in the position of solving all of these problems right now.
And it's been absolutely intriguing to have this time with all of us at the table with the school leader, especially for me, to start to understand the complexity that each school is facing, whether it's a particular population. For instance, particular population, when you think about like the RISE program, there's something that they may need that then may impact how they schedule a building. And so to get to know schools on that type of intimate level is really helpful to us. And you know, what I knew, but what it just confirmed is that it's not one size fits all, that we're gonna have to until, you know, I think the middle school review is going to help with some of this. One of the things that Gabe said about the middle school review that was really interesting was that New Solutions, who's going to be engaging in that work, said, well, it's a middle school review, but it's really hard to separate K-5 from 6 to 8 when you're in the same building, you have the same teachers teaching both kindergarten and 8th grade. And so I think it's going to help us to look at places where we could be more efficient. And so, you know, it's just all of the school leaders are really working hard to do what's best for their schools. And sometimes there are things that happen, that some decisions they make that have unintended consequences. And then also sometimes we put them in the position of making really hard choices and letting go of something for something else. And we never want to put a principal in that moral dilemma. We want our children to have them to have everything, and we want them to have access to everything. We want to do that in a way that doesn't break their back. And so it's just been a real learning experience. And I feel like it's brought our team together, just hearing this information. So I don't know, now I'm just talking about how I'm benefiting from the process, but.
No, but if you are, they are too. And that's the important part. And I think everybody is benefiting from it. So thank you for doing it.
No, it's been great. And one of the things, which is, this doesn't have to do with time on learning, but at the end of each meeting, we come away, Erin Cooley has put together a really remarkable task sheet that is like, hey, here is the task, here's the person, and here's when it's due, so that we're accountable to schools, because very often schools will say, I told central office this problem and they never did anything. And so this is a way to hold ourselves accountable for supporting them in real time. So bringing it back to time on learning, I think, one, we're gaining a better understanding. We don't have this issue solved, but we have unearthed with data the discrepancy across schools. And there is certainly a discrepancy between content areas. And so I know that there's a lot of concern around science and social studies. And so we're trying to think really critically about how we fix that in the immediate. And so I think it's going to be school by school how we support them until we get something that's more structured in place.
I just want to say thank you for doing this. I think there are some people whose brains workle this way, and there are other people's brains who don't. And I think if you find the right person whose brain workles this way, they can just put 6 pounds of flour in a 5-pound bag and nobody knows how they did it. So I think as long as those people, and not the people who are like, this would be great if somebody could figure it out. Not those people on the committee. It might be best. But I just really appreciate. I think this is one of those places, you know, Leslie, where your experience as a K-8 principal is just so enormously amazing for the district to have you in central office now. In addition to everyone else, of course, but just I think that reality check on everything, and the real idea that. That central office essentially is in service to the schools, and the schools are in service to the families and students, and just the mentality of like, we're trying to make this easier and not harder is just so welcome and so important, because this can really drive, I don't know why I'm on budget tonight, but like this can drive, really, costs and just incredible aggravation in the buildings. And so, like I said, you know better than anyone else, but I just really appreciate tackling this. And especially if you have people, like I know Jamie like loves this, right? Doesn't Jamie love
my
it?
goodness.
Oh my
Jamie,
gosh. Yeah.
Jamie is scheduler of the world.
She is.
And you're totally right, Susan. Some people have minds for this. I don't have a scheduling mind, but Michelle does and Gabe does. And so, it's really helpful to have, it's helpful. That's why it's helpful to have everyone at the table. And what we're learning, and what principals I think will admittedly say, is some principals feel more comfortable with scheduling than others.
Right.
It's really a task. I mean, I mean, I'm probably saying too much, but I remember when my husband first became a principal of a middle school in Boston, and he was gone like every night for 2 weeks. He wasn't coming home till like 11. And he's like, I'm working on the schedule. I'm working on, and I was like, it is not that serious. What are you doing every night till 11? And then I became a principal and I had to go back and say, oh my gosh, Harold, I'm so sorry. This schedule is a beast. This is crazy. So it's really hard, and it's particularly hard to schedule a K-8 because you have developmental needs that you need to meet for our youngest learners, and then our learners who are about to go to high school and they're entering into their teenage years, and that's different. So yeah.
And I think the other thing, Leslie, that we've also learned is, maybe somebody already said this, we also recognize just how difficult it is. We have some very specialized programs in our district, which have also created situations where we have to share staff between buildings.
Right.
And we have one building that shares staff with every other building in the district. And that's really hard because it has so few sections. And so how do we support, or how do we intentionally try to just share with like 2 other buildings instead of 6?
And we're also, we don't want it to be an I gotcha moment, but and to your point around budget, Susan, it's helping us to see where schools maybe don't have the FTE that they should, or where their FTE are underutilized. Yeah. And so that's a real thing. We really, especially with what's going on with budget, we have to be efficient. It's just the days of, you just have extra to have extra, that those are gone. And so, we want what we need to service children appropriately. But if there's extra, we have to address that.
Yeah, and I remember when I was early on in school committee, there was a principal who was wonderful and will remain nameless, but they were one of these people whose brain workles this way, and they kind of sat with one of their colleagues and redid a schedule and basically found like 3.5 FTEs. And it's like, well, it's not that school didn't have the formal number of whatever it was, math specialists, literacy specialists, guidance counselors, whatever, but because they were sharing staff, because they had some part-time staff who they really wanted to retain, but, couldn't without, some accommodations, and because staff were traveling between, all those things just drive inefficiencies. And it's like, oh, wow, now I have 3.5 FTEs back to refocus on children. And so like, it really matters, not just for the budget, but like for what principals are, dying for, which is more FTEs. So anyway, thank you again for doing this.
No, thank you. So we're excited. Now we've been through 2, we'll have 4 done by the end of the week. And then Gabe is also, we're going to engage the high school in a process, but it's going to look a little bit different from this one. So he's helping us with that.
Do you think that we'll be able to get through all the K-8s this year?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, great.
Oh,
That's wonderful. I just think that what I'm hearing, it sounds like such a wonderful collaborative process and really building a sense of team.
Yeah, I think the last one's.
That's awesome. Go ahead, Gabe.
The last one's on like May 5th or something.
Oh, so they're already scheduled. That's fantastic.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, great. That's great. And I love the idea of like really the team being able to look at it at a global level, especially one of the things I think is the trickiest is when you have staff that are running across town to go to different schools, and that's really inefficient. And where people are spending time in cars and finding parking and all of that. So I'd love to get those folks in front of kids. So that's great. That's really great. So, all right. So those are scheduled. Does anyone have any other questions about this?
One quick question. I'm curious how you're tackling the high school in terms of this.
Sure. So the high school is
I didn't mean, tackling.
No, I understand. I understand. So because of the new building at 22 Tappan and having a reunited physical campus, even though it's now bigger, the high school is looking at a new schedule, right? So for the last couple of years, they've had this really awkward hybrid transitioning kids through cohorted travel, like big passing times to get out to OLS and all this stuff, right? And the fact that Hal made that work at all is frankly mind-blowing. So part of what we've done is we've actually brought in some consultants. We've brought in the folks from New Solutions who are going to be working on the middle school review. They had some space in their schedule, and we had some grant funding that has allowed them to do some of the strategic work with the high school to make sure we know what the priorities are. And one of the things they actually said is the current high school schedule is literally the most complex schedule they've seen across thousands of schools.
Mhm. I'm not surprised.
No, and it was a really good cathartic moment for the whole scheduling committee at the high school, where they could kind of breathe and, okay, we're not crazy, right? This is actually as hard as we thought it is. But they've settled on a few priorities. So like making sure that the schedule is consistent. So the way they're saying it is it passes the wake up test. So I wake up on Tuesday, I know where I'm supposed to be. Right, that the schedule is simple enough so that we know like what the block sizes are and what the block lengths are. And then the other piece that's been a little bit trickier, frankly, is making sure that every kid has full access to the instructional program. And the same concerns we raised about the K-8 situation is the same at the high school, right? We have a single length day and we have a certain number of blocks, and a kid who maybe needs a learning center block may lose out on an elective because of graduation requirements, right? And that's a hard trade to make. And so it's part of what we're doing, and part of the way we're tackling it is, and this has been really helpful from the folks at New Solutions, is they've said you can schedule anything, but you can't schedule everything. And they've repeated that more times than I care to count. And then the other piece that they've said is sometimes it takes 2 to 3 years to get a schedule where you want it to be. And so the plan is to make a few changes to get the consistency, the reliability, and the simplicity that folks are looking for. That's the goal for next year. And then what we realized, and really what the team realized, is that some of these access questions are more complicated than we have an opportunity to do for next year. And so the scheduling committee is essentially committing to starting up next September, so that we have a really long runway to make some of these more, I guess, programmatic shifts potentially, or a little more, not just trimming around the edges of like, is it a 50-minute block or a 55-minute block, but maybe some more fundamental things like how many times does advisory meet? How many times does X block meet? All of these other pieces in the high school schedule. And so I think they did a nice job of realizing how much they could actually get accomplished, and then making a commitment to continuing the longer term work. And so Hal and then Britt Stevens, who's our career and tech ed coordinator, have done a really good job co-leading that committee, which has representatives from every department, has representatives from deans and specialized programs. And they've gotten into it in some really thoughtful and sometimes intense ways. And I think it's great to see people taking this really seriously, because it's a really important part. So they're getting to the stage where we're down to, I think, two drafts, maybe 3 drafts. And Anthony's going to kind of have the final weigh in. And then, of course, it has to go to central office for its own schedule review, the same way the K-8s are doing. And there's also some stipulations that if the schedule changes significantly, there's union eyes on it. But I don't predict it will change that significantly. It's a little bit TBD.
I'll just say one really quick thing about that. I don't think that the educators will make this mistake, but a lot of lay people make this mistake when looking at the high school schedule, which is there are a lot of singleton classes. And because of that, it drives complexity, but what it doesn't drive, people have this idea of like, well, we should just reduce it to make it simpler and have fewer singleton classes. I think part of what happens though, is that number one, that just reduces sort of part of what makes, BHS awesome and amazing and educators. And so the other
interrupt
thing
you a little bit,
Yeah.
Susan, just because we're talking about like the weekly block schedule, not the master schedule of what courses are offered.
Oh, okay.
That's coming next in like
Okay.
the sectioning conversation.
Okay.
So yeah, we're not at that stage yet.
Okay, great. I just, because we had this, I have override on my mind right now. And because we had this conversation in the last override and people were like, oh, well, we just reduce the number of singletons, that will reduce the number of FTEs you need and make it simpler. But it doesn't, because whether or not you still need a social studies class for those 10th graders. They still have to go to social studies, whether it's a singleton or whether it's the same one everyone else is doing. So at any rate, the efficiencies are not what you think you get. And I just want to put that out there because that's going to kind of come up, or it has come up in the past as a challenge to us. And it just is sort of a little bit of a red herring. So that's great. And then, like I said, it's not educators making this mistake. I think it's sort of the public. We just sometimes have to keep reminding them.
All right, and perfect timing because I see that Mindy just joined us. I was going to share these slides, but I'm glad she's here. She's engaging right now in interviews for Star Academy, which, maybe we can even give you a numbers update on that. Mindy and Keith have worked incredibly hard. That was a really successful summer program last year. And so we're gearing up again, and we've got more kiddos than seats. And so we're really working to accommodate as many kiddos as we can. So she is interviewing. And that being said, I'm going to share my screen again. And Mindy, do you want to walk through the slides?
Sure, I'm happy to do that if that's helpful.
Okay, that would be great.
You ready for me to start?
I'm ready. Can you guys see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. Uh-oh, did we lose Mindy? Wait, I can't see people anymore. Wait a second. Oh no, I think we just lost
Mindy is there. Mindy's there.
Is she? Okay.
Yeah, I see her.
Oh,
I think she's frozen though.
ah, man. Okay. Well, I'll give a little preview while she's unfreezing. I think, this is one of the additions to our OTL goals. And so when I came on early on, I found out that we were required to do, oh my goodness, I know it as CIMP, and it is a progress monitoring review of our EL program via the state. And so Mindy came and sat down with Michelle and I, and we started talking about what were the findings from the last report? And then, oh, there she is. It's okay. You're muted, Mindy. Uh-oh, can people hear?
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear
Okay,
you.
I may just have to have the video off on the phone, so I apologize if I'm joining again from the phone.
Okay, no problem.
Okay, so Leslie, did you start already? I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. I just gave a little bit of context about the review, but very little.
Okay, great. So thank you so much. And thank you for the opportunity to just share a little bit about what we're doing with the ELE program review, which has been a really exciting process thus far. So part of the purpose of having this was to really strengthen the quality of the programs that we already offer our students and really continue to identify ways that we can improve outcomes for all of the English learners we serve here in Brookline. There really is a heavy emphasis on examining equitable access of our students across all parts of Brookline here in the school community and outside of the school community. So we have hired Dr. Berta Elena Rojas, who is with us through Humanity Advanced, and she's really examining the design of our programs here in Brookline, reviewing all of the practices, the policies, the procedures that we have, evaluating the data. And she's already begun by hosting focus groups with families and staff, and she will be doing 2 site visits to our schools in May. And at the end of this, we hope to have this comprehensive report of the evaluation, all of the different findings, and her recommendations. The idea is that that will be available and ready to share by June 30th. So the entire timeline of this project is from March through June. So those 4 months is when Dr. Rojas is here in Brookline working with us through the review. Here you can see the focus group schedule so that you can see which focus groups have already taken place, which are still to come. But we did decide to host focus groups by language for our top language groups. So for example, the focus group on March 28th for Spanish EL families, that focus group was conducted in Spanish. And the same thing for the other language groups, Japanese and Korean, and Chinese as well. And then we've had focus groups for specific stakeholders here, groups of staff that we work closely with, like our guidance team, principals, general ed teachers, special ed directors. And then we have some focus groups coming up that will include vice principals. We'll do another focus group for our English learner teachers, another focus group for general ed teachers, and then we'll be working with the program and curriculum coordinators and directors.
Stop sharing. See if there are any questions. Ellen?
Yeah, I'm wondering how you decided on those groups of English language learners, the Spanish, Korean, and Japanese and Chinese. And what about the others?
So it's the groups that have the highest requests for an interpreter. That's how we
I
determine.
see. Okay.
Yep. So any language group that had 10 or more families that require an interpreter or have requested an interpreter, we provided the focus group in that language.
Oh, okay. And the other parents then, can they comment or?
There was a focus group that was conducted in English only.
Oh,
So-
okay. That's what I didn't get. That's the part I didn't get. Okay,
Yeah, there was
thank you.
another one that was conducted English only. Mhm.
Okay.
Susan?
Yeah, just briefly, this is great. I'll just, hi Mindy.
Susan.
Ask the same question I asked on social studies, which is to the extent that this includes families and we're including high school age students, does it make sense to get feedback on this from the students themselves? Because oftentimes, as you know better than any of us, students are kind of the interpreters for their families, and they kind of go through a lot also in trying to do this, especially at the older ages, but even at young ages, they interpret for their families. So at any rate, I just want to put out there that the question of whether it makes sense to, offer the students an opportunity to give us their ideas.
Yeah, I can certainly bring that to the consultant. The design of the review was based on the model that the Department of Education requires us to follow for our program evaluation. It's this very specific model. It's called the Castaneda three-pronged test. And so Dr. Rojas is literally using this three-pronged test structure to facilitate this evaluation in Brookline. So everything we're doing is what's required in that test. We did not go beyond that test structure, but I can certainly talk to her. Certainly our students provide very valuable information, and ask her if she would like to meet with them, have a focus group for the students. We could certainly do that.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Mindy.
You're welcome.
Mindy, can I ask you another question? I'm wondering, will the review cover any of our translation services?
Yes.
So we'll be getting feedback from families about translation services and how they feel, how accurate they feel they are, and their ability to access them, those kinds of things.
The only question that I saw in the focus group, there was a question that was related to language assistance, if families felt that they were provided with language assistance to be able to access information in the district, but I did not see it go beyond that question.
Okay.
She may have, prompted with follow-ups, but I do not participate in the focus group, so I can't tell you exactly what parents have shared and how she as a facilitator has asked any additional questions. So maybe there will be more, but at this point, I'm not sure. I can certainly ask her, and if there's another method to get additional information, if you think that's something you'd like to have, we can try to do that as well.
I'm just been wondering about it, just based on some community, feedback on, and I know that you all are working very, very hard with the resources that you have. And so my goal, just so you know, is just in seeking to get you additional resources to support your work. That's all.
No, I appreciate that. And certainly we gather feedback from families in other ways about our translation interpretation services. Within my own department, we survey families regularly and gather that information. And certainly I have information that I could share, but it has not been part of or formally part of this evaluation process.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. Thanks, Mindy.
You're welcome.
Can I ask you one other question? Sorry. Mindy, last I remember, and this may be outdated information, you had a group of parents who were a little bit kind of a kitchen cabinet or an advisory group of EL parents.
That's correct.
I'm not sure. Can you just tell us what they do? Because I've gotten the question a number of times. I'm not sure I know the answer to it. Just what is that status? How are they, like, who are they? And do they, or, some of the other parent groups like, BaFin or others that are active, like, how do they kind of have a voice in this through you or some other way?
So the parent group is called the English Learner Parent Advisory Council. We refer to them as LPAC, and they meet several times during the year. There is a board, they have a set of bylaws, and it is open to parents, guardians of English learners in Brookline. The purpose is really to promote and support the success of our English learners here in the district. And it really is intended by law to advise the district and the schools regarding matters that impact our English learners. And this could be the programs that we offer, the opportunities that are available to the students, any improvement plans as they relate to English learners. And so what we do is we gather information from our families to learn what it is that they'd like to cover in these meetings. We've had guest speakers throughout this year participate in the meetings. So for example, Janae, she presented information about equity work, and our families raised a lot of questions as it pertained to equity in our English learners. So that was really valuable to both sides for Janae to hear from our families so that she could better understand their experiences, and also for our families to understand the work that the district is doing and where they see themselves in that work. We've also had Dr. Guillory come on as a guest speaker to better understand from families what their experiences are like in general as English learners. And he took a lot of that feedback and went back and talked to folks, and some things have happened as a result of that. In addition, they've taken up some issues that have come up in the district. For example, we originally had bilingual paraprofessionals here, and that was a really sort of a hot topic that LPAC took on, and they were able to gather many, many families to better understand what that support was like, what it meant to have to lose that support, et cetera. They advocate strongly for equity in terms of access to after-school programming, our extended day programs, and what options are available to them after school. So the families really have an opportunity to connect with one another, discuss these issues. I attend all of the meetings so that I can gather that information. Helen has participated in some of our meetings, so she's privy to some of this.
And Andy is the school committee liaison, isn't he? Andy Liu?
Andy has participated in many of our meetings as well. Yes, he's
I
attended.
thought you have to have a school committee representative there.
Yes, yeah, that's right. Andy comes to almost all of those meetings. That's right. Yep. Yeah, so he's been at a lot of our meetings as well. And, it's been really helpful, I think, for our families just to feel like they have a platform to voice their experiences and have folks who are there to listen to them and hopefully act on what they share. So does that help, Susan?
Yeah, that's great. That's fantastic. I do wonder just this, I don't know if you heard that earlier, but this is my last curriculum meeting ever. And so I just want to flag for maybe my fellow school committee members that this is the kind of thing that would be an amazing short presentation to the full school committee to just get it visibility that these, like all of what you just said, Mindy. I mean, I feel like I consider myself an involved school committee member, and I didn't know most of that. I knew it used to be in place, but I hadn't heard about it recently, especially, kind of what you shared about from Linus and Janae, and maybe I just missed it when they had presented it to us, but it's just such an important sort of, channel for us and for you guys in particular, but just for the district. So anyway, just an idea, not that we don't have late enough school committee meetings, but just, I think this is an important one to be able to daylight a little bit. So thank you for your work.
I think it's important work, but I think it's also important to highlight how quickly our English language learners are able to progress through the program and become, not need the program anymore. I mean, that's the goal of the program, to be able to help them to be able to access their education through English. And at least in the past, I think it was like 18 months or so. And I don't know what it is today, but those sorts of statistics I think would be helpful, Mindy, if that's still the case.
We have all of that available. We keep a lot of data for our program. We have to report it both at the state level and federally. So we have tons and tons of data available. I'm happy to share that anytime. We have a remarkable group of students and families in this program that, I'd love to be able to share the great work.
That would be important, actually.
Got it on the list.
What's that?
I've got it on my long list.
Yeah, but this is for the full school committee, is what we're talking about.
Well, we can definitely bubble it up.
We're not going anywhere. So these families, they will keep coming. Yeah, we welcome them.
We thank you for your hard work and thank
you.
you for coming.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Thank you. And thanks to Leslie and everyone in OTL for all of their support with this evaluation process. It's been great. So thank you all so much.
Yeah, we
No,
look
thank
forward to
you.
when you get the report at the end of June. I think, I know I would be interested in hearing sort of, the results of the report if we can maybe get that forwarded to us at some point. I don't know if other.
Absolutely.
Or maybe you can come back and tell us.
Yeah,
Yeah, definitely.
Happy to.
okay. That would be
Happy to.
great.
Sounds good.
Okay.
Thank you so much. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks,
you,
Wendy. Have a
Wendy.
lovely evening. Okay, I think we're on to the Office of Teaching and Learning Curriculum Survey.
So we don't have a slide for that. It's something that we can just do a quick preview of, but we haven't made a lot of headway actually. I was hoping to make more over the break, but we do want to get a survey out to teachers just to get their feedback on what's working, what's not, support that they need from us. And I think that it's just, well, one of the things that got us thinking about that is that DESE has just required all districts to report out on the curriculum that they use. And they've asked us to do that in service of having more central supports that come from DESE that could then support districts. And so we just want to get a good sense from educators. I mean, certainly when I go into classrooms, I hear, some cheers about particular curriculum. I hear some boos about curriculum, whether it's warranted or not. And so I think it would be great just to gather that data. And then also, we had a conversation a couple of months back about understanding our differences, and we wanted to get teacher feedback on that. And so we wanted to roll that into this survey. And that's part of why we're working to push this out. But then full transparency, we just didn't get to it. And so that's something that we're going to get on that.
Well, you've had a few things on your plate. I think quite a few things.
So we didn't forget about it, but we're going to work with Erin Cooley to get that out. And we want to ask the right questions, because if we're asking for teachers' time to complete, I don't want to have to ask them again sooner than later. So hopefully we can give you an update on that next time we're together.
Okay.
So, yeah, I think it'd be great if we could get the survey, or the collective I'm not making the survey. So it would be, I think it'd be great if the survey could, at least if we could do it in May, if you guys could do it in May before teachers leave for the, start getting summer brain in June.
Yeah, I think one of the things that we need to do though is to make sure we don't overload teachers with surveys. We probably have to just look and see what departments also our surveys or where surveys are going, and just in terms of our timeline.
Yeah.
We need the information soon, but
do we think, is it possible to do before the end of the school year, do we think?
I think it will be. Yeah, that's our goal, is to get it out before the school year. So the real pull is just finding the time to get a thoughtful and thorough survey that's not generic questions. I think that I was a little bit overzealous in thinking that we could kind of pull from, for instance, Panorama, who we use for the SEL screener, and we've used in the past for our school level surveys when we've done those. But then when I looked at it, the questions are just too generic, and I think we need something more specific. And so it's just going to take us a little more time to get the right survey together.
Okay. Well, there's lots of things going on, so lots of good work, lots of good things happening. And then I think the last thing, we got 11 minutes. We got like one more item, middle school review. Where are we at with that?
Yeah, so I kind of briefly mentioned it before, but essentially we had a little bit of a hiccup with purchasing, where the award letter maybe got lost in the mail. We're not really sure because it's a Boston company. It didn't have to go very far, but we got that sorted out. Purchasing got the award letter officially over to New Solutions, so we can actually engage with them legally on this topic. But I'm in the process of setting up a kind of initial meeting with Leslie, Michelle, myself, and the two guys from New Solutions who are going to head that work to get things kicked off and really start to investigate what can be done kind of from a like paperwork review. That's a big part of it because that's work that can happen without over the summer. We just have to make sure we collect the materials. Again, their work is going to focus mostly on scheduling and staffing. So a lot of what we're getting from this schedule review process is going to feed that in addition to things that building leaders have. So that's kind of where we're at. Like I said, they've been working doing some of the strategic work with the high school already. And the high school scheduling team has been really excited about the work. After we kind of have done them one at a time because we weren't exactly sure, right? And after the first one, like one of the first comments I got is like, when are these guys coming back? They're really good, which was really reaffirming. And so, yeah, I think, again, like we've said before, like all of this has taken a little bit longer, but I'm really happy with the folks we've secured. And then as is a bit of a theme, right? The funding is grant funded. So it's one-time money, but the nice thing about this one-time money and the way we've earmarked it is we are able to roll it forward into future years. So we don't lose the opportunity by the delays. The delays won't impact the quality of the work.
That's great. So, and there is some potential that they can get a start on this over the summer if we get them some of the materials.
Yeah, I think it'll just be kind of part of what we need to do at the initial meeting is like sorting out the timeline. There's a variety of activities, for lack of a better term, right? Like, again, paperwork and sort of data review, they can pull a bunch of our stuff from Aspen, but then there's also like focus group work and interviews and kind of digging into how a school actually runs. One of the things they wanted to do at the high school was walk the physical plant. So they have a sense of like, what kind of passing time is required at this high school building, right? And so that's how we
just have them go from the 4th floor of the main building over to the 3rd floor of the new building and using stairs.
Well, there's actually a 4th floor in the new building too. So
is there a 4th? I thought there were
there's 4 floors in 22 Tappan, but basically 0 kids are doing that because SWS doesn't have 9th graders. There are a couple who have AP physics over at 22 Tappan though. It's a hike. But that's the kind of thing they need to do also so that they can be authentic, right? We know that the Ruffin Ridley cafeteria is wildly different than the Lawrence cafeteria and how many students it can serve and how many lunches each principal needs to run to accommodate students safely. Like that's the kind of stuff they want to engage in, which again, like they're going to do a really hands-on, thorough, thoughtful look, and I'm really excited about it.
Great. Actually, there are some kids in SWS who take physics.
I was just saying, yeah, AP physics, there's a couple.
Yeah.
It's not many.
Okay.
That's a wild outlier compared to most. Most students are going from 22 to the UAB, or maybe from 115 over to the UAB.
Which is enough right there too.
Yeah, it's a real shift. One of the
5 minutes.
It's one of the unintended consequences. And so like we're actually looking at a 7-minute passing period for the high school schedule, which of course takes instructional time. It's all a trade when you don't extend the school day.
Especially if we don't have more days too. So we have the shortest days and the shortest schedule. The least amount of days.
I wasn't aware about the number of days in the calendar.
Yeah, there's I think 180 teaching days in our calendar, isn't that correct?
Yep.
And there's some schools, I think Newton goes 184 or something like that.
Oh, 180, everybody's 180.
Yeah.
I think some schools have more.
I'm not aware, but I'm not saying it's not true.
You only have 180 days?
Yeah, I don't know any other teachers who don't work 180, but
yeah,
it may be out there, but
okay, maybe
anyways, moving on. New business. Sorry. I'm on a time clock, Helen. I'm sorry. It's 5:54. I'm
It's
determined. I'm on a mission.
It's
Unless you
okay.
really feel
Sorry, I
passionate
was
about this.
distracting things here.
No, it's all right. Unless you feel passionate. I don't really want, I'm not trying to cut you off. I'm just trying to stay focused. I've been known to chat myself. So, all right, new business. So our next meeting, or sorry, Gabe, McCormick, are you all set on middle school review? Are we good here?
Yeah, that's where we're at. And so hopefully by the next meeting, we'll have met with the guys from New Solutions and be able to talk a little bit more specifically.
Okay, beautiful. It's lovely. It's very good. I'm sorry, Helen.
I'll just jump in real quick and saying what we're working on now is just communicating a lot of what we shared with you today, to everybody else. So about the dyslexia screener, the middle school review, these meetings are certainly helpful in informing people. Maybe we can include a link to this. But that is one of the things that is definitely at the forefront of my mind is getting a good communication strategy together.
Well, maybe part of it would be adding it to the superintendent's weekly newsletter once a month as quick, Office of Teaching and Learning.
Yep, definitely.
Parents would read that.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of really great work going on, a lot of projects, a lot of forward movement on a lot of really great stuff. And so, we should publicize the great work that's happening, a lot of heavy lifting and amazing stuff. And
or maybe every other, once a month, the Office of Teaching and Learning does their newsletter instead of the superintendent.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, working on that.
Yeah, and if there's things that, like I'm happy to highlight the work that, things that we've talked about at the in the curriculum subcommittee updates at full school committee, but it's not nearly, it's late at night it's late in the agenda. So it's often late at night and it's really not as in-depth as the full reports. And I often reference to people that we have a recording of these meetings, but it's not. And if there are particular items that we really need to bubble up and when we're ready to the full committee, please let me know. And I'm happy to talk with the chair and the vice chair about getting these items on the agenda when we feel like we're ready for a report to the full school committee. So please just let me know when you think it's really important that we inform the community at large about, when we're ready for a presentation.
Yeah. Just one thing that happened between the last curriculum meeting and this meeting was the presentation by the students on AP Chinese 6 and questions about the status of the China exchange program. And so Leslie, I thought you sort of summarized everything really nicely in an email. I'm not sure if that got to everyone though, and I don't know if there was any follow-up, Jen, with the students. But at any rate, that was the one where we had, whatever it was, 14, 16 students asking about AP Chinese 6, which was also tied into the FTE associated with the Czechs program. They're different, but related. So anyway, I just wanted to put that back out there because that was one piece hanging from our last meeting, between the last meeting and this meeting.
Yep, and I actually have it on my to-do list to reach out to the students because it looks like, and Gabe, correct me if I'm wrong, they're still doing the sectioning. And so I think the cart was a little bit before the horse in terms of saying that they weren't going to have that class. I think that wasn't quite finalized yet.
Yeah, that's actually the next step in all the high school scheduling work is to do sectioning. And so in the curriculum coordinators meeting, actually this last Monday, that we started that process. And so the coordinators are doing all the work of here's all the requests, here's the numbers, and figuring that out.
No, absolutely. And obviously there are certain times when we can't run a class because it doesn't have a minimum enrollment, and completely understand that. I will just note for some classes like African-American studies, like Chinese 6, where we've had parents come in the past advocate for those to be exceptions. We have a lot of advocates for exceptions on a lot of things, but we also just have a lot of people interested in some of the singletons that don't necessarily meet minimum requirements. So at any rate, I just want to put that out there because it's an experience we've had in the past. Helen, remember, some of you may also remember, but it's important to be aware of.
I think the high school coordinators are well aware of those situations, and they often get those direct questions too.
Great. So at this point, no decision has been made on the course at this time.
officially no decision has been made on literally any course at Brookline High.
Okay, okay, fair enough. Okay, fair enough. And I
Just
think,
as an FYI, in the past, I think Chinese 6 has sometimes joined with Chinese 5. The same teacher has taught
Yep,
both sections. I don't know how exactly, but
Yep, sometimes courses are cross-listed and kind of co-scheduled. That's happened in a few different content areas, not just world language.
okay.
and I think that's happened with other languages as well. And
Yep.
I think that's happened. And I do think there has been some follow-up, Susan. I think you asked about the China exchange program, and I've been following up directly with Leslie and with community supporters and the board about that. And so there has been communication about that. And so,
What is there a plan for the fall or?
Leslie, you want to talk about that? So
Sure.
go
Yep.
ahead.
So we want to keep ties with the program. And so we're really following a model that Newton's used where they have a liaison that keeps just the connection going via, I think, pen pals. And there were a number of other pieces that Newton was implementing, and then stipending a teacher to take on that work to keep the connection going. And it also sounds like the point person for that, the checks program will be changing. And so we want to start to induct somebody into that work that will take that on. So doing both of those things in tandem. So we're really following a model that Newton uses to keep the relationship going and planning for when travel is back, we can get right back to it.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think there was some virtual kind of exchange work going on as well, just to keep the relationship going between the schools. So I think there'll be some work in that way going on next year, although we don't anticipate an actual physical student exchange happening next year. But we'd like to begin the planning process for that, for future exchange. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah, especially since China's locking down right now, I don't think it's a good idea to.
There's no plan for that for an actual physical exchange, but we'd like to make sure we keep the relationship up and that we have people in place and plans in place so that when we're able to, we have that strong relationship built. So that's the plan right now. Okay, so the next meeting is Tuesday, May 17th. We have tentatively scheduled a follow-up on the DESE SEL curriculum. We said we would come back to that in May, and also an update on the Understanding Our Differences update. I will see if we have the information back from the survey, if we're ready to do that, or if we need to come back to that in June. So I think we may have to sort of see where that falls. Is there any other items under new business at this time that people want to bring up?
I'm not sure I had the answer to my question about the Facing History curriculum and where we are with that and where we're going. So it doesn't have to be right now, but I would like to know what our plans are.
Okay. So can you clarify for me, Helen, was that specific to the high school?
No, it's actually the 8th grade, I think. It was taught in the past.
Yes. You're referring to the Holocaust and Human Behavior Unit specifically, right? Facing History has a lot of other.
Yeah, that one.
Yeah,
Okay.
I thought Greg addressed that, but if you can frame the question, we can get that back to you.
Well, it wasn't clear to me that we're still using it. That was the question. And our teachers being trained in it, new teachers who have come into the system.
Yeah. No, I don't believe we've trained anyone since around 2016 or 2017.
Well, that's,
And I think, as Greg described, like, folks do it to different degrees. To my knowledge, there is no teacher that uses the full 12-week unit at this stage. And as he described, part of what's happening in 8th grade is a shift towards a civics curriculum that's also linked to an MCAS. And the Holocaust in Europe doesn't fit that according to DESE. And I know there's local concerns that are related. And we know that in 10th grade world history, the Holocaust is also taught.
Okay.
So we're not going to be teaching it, is what you're saying.
I think Greg is working on that with the 8th grade team.
Okay. Because it's sort of concerning, especially since it was a curriculum that was begun here in Brookline. And if you look at some of the stuff about the racism at the high school and, anti-Semitism, a lot of, that stuff is taught in that curriculum and at 8th grade at a point when kids can be receptive to it and hopefully avoid some of the problems that we're having at the high school. So it's concerning to me.
Do you think that, Gabe, that you and Greg could maybe have a conversation about this and maybe think about if this isn't if the 8th grade spot isn't the spot, where is the spot?
I mean, I know Greg is paying attention to that. Again, I think when he
Okay.
was here presenting, he spoke about it. So it might be worth reviewing what he said as a reminder. And then if there are additional questions, we can be in touch.
Okay. Helen?
Just while we're on this,
Oh, okay, Leslie has to go. And then Susan was trying to say something, so.
no, just while we're on this, and just because the high school is about to have a BHS day on anti-Semitism, we used to have an ADL partnership, Warriors for Change, and I think it was put on hiatus for the pandemic, but I think just sort of pulling out some of those things and sort of showing, especially since, I don't know if you guys saw the new ADL report today, which that anti-Semitism is at an all-time high. And there's a record number of incidents. And because this is coming up at the high school later in May, it's probably worth just pulling together a little bit of our answer as to how we've treated some of these issues in the past throughout the curriculum, so that we're ahead of those questions when they come, and like things like the ADL partnership, kind of the status of it, or what happened to all those students that got trained by ADL 3 years ago, and are we doing more, just so that we're ready with all of the things that we've done in the past and plan to do in the future, when it comes up in a couple of weeks.
Yep. Thanks.
Okay. All right, I think that we're gonna wrap up for today, and we can come back to this. We can think about this a little bit more and come back to this conversation. So we will meet again on Tuesday, May 17th. Thank you, everybody. That was a lot to cover. We touched on a lot of things, so thank you. Have a good evening, and I'll see most of you tomorrow. Have a good night. Thank you.